After months and months of waiting, the 2024 season begins today for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish with the start of preseason camp. The biggest headlines, most important position battles, and why it's time to believe the hype is coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Wednesday, July 31st. And thank you for starting your day right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm the host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports. And you can watch the show on YouTube or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching on YouTube, this is your reminder to please like the video below and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's get into it. Today is the official start of the 2024 season for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as they kick off training camp today, and I could not be more excited. The Irish have a loaded roster, an experienced and extremely talented coaching staff, and a favorable schedule, but there are still some questions that need to be answered over the course of these next few weeks in camp. And to preview it all, I had one of my favorite recurring guests, Greg Flammang from Irish Sports Daily, join the show to break it all down. Check it out. All right, I'm joined once again by a great friend of the program, Greg Flammang from Irish Sports Daily. Greg and I are doing a little home and home action. I went on his podcast, Hit and Hustle, yesterday to preview fall camp, and we had a great time. But we still have more to talk about, so now here he is on Locked On Irish. Greg, before we talk about all the storylines going into fall camp, a lot of Irish fans were in panic mode because four-star quarterback commit Deuce Knight was on Auburn's campus this past weekend. Do you think that's good or bad for Notre Dame's chances of keeping him?
As the meme says, it's not great, Bob. It's not great at all. It's not what you want. You don't want your the face of your class to be off on trips to SEC country. So I'll say it's not good.
I agree. And that was talking recruiting on today's show. And just so we're clear, I'm being sarcastic. I understand why fans are concerned that Knight visited Auburn, but considering Notre Dame kicks off camp today and there are so many things to focus on when it comes to this season, that's what we're going to focus on for today's show. I promise I'll talk more about recruiting later in the week. But now that camp is here, Greg, tell me, do you believe the hype about this Irish team?
I do. First of all, I think a lot of that has to do with the defense. I think the defense is going to be really good. The defensive line is long on talent. They're long on experience. They're long on proven production, and they're long on a lot of youth. But behind all that experience and production, right? You've got guys like Jordan Botelho and Riley Mills and Howard Cross and RJ Oben, who have played a ton of snaps. They've had a lot of production at various colleges. The previous three guys at Notre Dame, RJ Oben at Duke, they've put in a lot of work in major college football. And then you have guys like Josh Burnham and Boubacar Traore and Bryce Young, Gabriel Rubio, who's coming back, and Jason Onye, right? So these are just the backups, right? So we're talking like 8 or 9 deep on the defensive line, talent, experience, youth. So there's a lot there to be excited about. So the defense looks like they're really good. They've got the defending Bednarik Award winner at safety and Xavier Watts. They've got maybe the best corner in college football in Benjamin Morrison. Young linebackers who are going to be kind of anchored by Jack Kaiser, who's been around for a very long time. He's done very well when he's been in the lineup for Notre Dame. Led by that, I think Riley Leonards is going to have a very good season. I don't have the same kind of concerns about him as other people do as far as like, is he going to be the most accurate guy in the world? Even if he's baseline, we're talking about a 63% passer. He's explosive. They've restocked their wide receiving core. They've got a lot of different types of bodies at wide receiver. A lot of guys who can stretch the field. And then the running backs, you got to love them and love Jadarian Price. And then you got tight ends, Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan. Ton of talent for Notre Dame. Offensive line is a big question. That's the thing that's got to get figured out. But I feel really, really good about this team. And whatever the hype is, I'm all in on it.
All right. Let's stay on Leonard for a second here because there are some concerns about his accuracy. I've been concerned about that. I think Notre Dame is going to run him early and often against Texas A&M. But what do you think Denbrock is going to ask of Leonard to do as a passer, particularly early on in this season? Because Notre Dame has a revamped wide receiving core. They have a guy who hopefully can go deep in Chris Mitchell, and they have some basically like 15 slot receivers who look like they could be really good this season. So I don't think that Riley Leonard is going to be throwing downfield a whole lot, and I think that Denbrock is going to create some mismatches for him. So how do you think they're going to utilize Leonard throwing the ball downfield?
It's kind of like you said, they're going to pick their spots, right? Like he's a heavy play action guy. He did it a lot at LSU. They were able to dictate matchups, right? That's something that Mike Denbrock did really well at LSU. He did it a lot at Cincinnati as well. Is he dictates matchups. He gets the matchups that he wants in the secondary, and then he exploits them when he gets them. So he's going to be able to do that. I think there's going to be a lot of RPO stuff. Getting the ball out quickly, making a lot of pre-snap decisions for Riley Leonard. And he didn't show it as much at Duke because it just wasn't a big part of their offense, but I think that's going to be a huge part of what Notre Dame does under Mike Denbrock and with the talent that they have at wideout, right? You can get the ball out to a guy like Jordan Faison, to Jaden Greathouse, to Jaden Harrison, right? Like get those guys on the run used to having the ball in their hands. And it also creates a lot of space for guys like Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. And so I think there's going to be a lot of situations where Mike Denbrock is dictating the matchups that he wants. A lot of pre-snap stuff for Riley Leonard, and that's something that he's going to be able to excel at. And so when he puts a defense in a bind like that, it's just up to the quarterback finding the matchup, and I think he's going to be able to do it.
As one of the most vocal supporters of the RPO and the one who's maybe pointed out Notre Dame's lack of it in their offense in the past couple of years, are you going to shed a tear when Notre Dame perfectly executes it the first time against Texas A&M?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I as I'm saying this, like as I was saying it just a second ago, I did get a little bit nervous. Like I have talked about this, I feel like I've been kind of led astray a little bit in terms of like preseason stuff.
Specifically last year, right?
Yeah.
We thought it'd be a much bigger part of the offense.
We did think that. It seemed to
That's what they told us.
They told us, they showed it to us, and then they just didn't really do it. So I don't know, but I think that if you just look at Mike Denbrock he'd have to deviate from what he's done for the last 6-7 years, and so I'm counting on that not happening. But so I think it's not just the one time; it's just kind of an entire kind of offense that has that sort of thing built in, and be able to execute at a high level. That's the thing that I'm pretty excited about.
Okay, what's going to be the big headline coming out of camp and, the lead up to the Texas A&M game?
Well, I think amongst Notre Dame fans is it looks like Emil Wagner is going to get the first crack at right tackle, right? I think that's been kind of the most discussed thing for fans throughout the offseason is what's the offensive line going to look like? I think they've settled in on Jag. You saw at left tackle. The left guard spot is going to be interesting with Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan kind of battling that out. That's going to be interesting. But I think people want to know about, the tackle spots. And I think Emil Wagner is going to be a big part of it. And so that'll be something that I think is going to be a headline about just like what the starting offensive line is and how they look as a whole. It's really hard to say, if I had to guess, we got something going up on Irish Sports Daily. Mike Frank asked us, to put in kind of like predictions for the fall camp, who the wide receiver is that's going to kind of surprise, get people buzzing. And I said Bo Collins. And the reason I think that is he wasn't seen in the spring. He wasn't able to practice. He had to finish up his degree, but he was in South Bend, so he was able to attend every practice. And I think getting him out on the football field, 6'3", about 200 pounds, like getting him out there, he's a really good athlete. And I think that he's going to generate some buzz. And I think he's going to be kind of a headliner for Notre Dame fans, just like the fact that, this is not something that we counted on, having an athlete like this. Didn't see it in the spring. So I think he's going to be kind of a headliner. I think it'll be him and Emil Wagner at right tackle.
Yeah, let's stay on the Wagner thing for a little bit because the offensive line is pretty much everyone's biggest concern going into camp. Plenty of reasons why. The lack of experience is the most obvious. Wagner has never started a game before. I think some people, myself included, just sort of assumed that they'd go with Tosh Baker to start in the A&M game and then maybe Wagner would beat him out as the season progressed. I mean, Tosh Baker won that competition to start in the bowl game, and I think that
Yeah.
mattered. Baker was getting the first team reps in spring practice, but it appears that something has changed over the course of the summer. So now Wagner is going to go out there with the first team against Texas A&M. What do you think are sort of the pros and cons of putting Wagner out there, even though he lacks experience, but could potentially have a higher ceiling?
Well, the pros, I mean, he's a very strong player. The fact that he's not as big, I think people see that as him getting shoved around, and that hasn't been the problem, right? Like he's been moving forward, he's done really well. He's a really good athlete, right? So there's a lot there in terms of just his athletic ability and his ability to move. So that's a pro on his end. Probably a little bit better pass blocker because of his ability to move. Look, I think, you say aside from his inexperience, I mean, I think that that's going to be kind of the biggest problem for him is like he just hasn't seen a ton of guys, right? Like he's seen Notre Dame's players, but he hasn't gotten like real live reps against an opponent in a game situation. And I know, you're facing some real guys in practice, right? Like Boubacar Traore and RJ Oben, like these are real guys, right? Like Jordan Botelho, like they've been around the block. But games are not practice, right? And so not having the kind of experience to deal with a player like, Texas A&M is going to be able to throw it in where like you got guys with multiple moves and multiple ways to beat you. And you get put in the blender a little bit. How's he going to react to that, right? Like that's going to be something that is kind of unknown for the coaching staff and Joe Rudolph specifically at offensive line. So you just have to kind of bank on like what you've seen and the traits that he's shown and the athletic ability that he has and being able to go out there in a real game situation and deal with the bullets that are going to be flying at that point. Because, once the game starts, it all kind of, the intensity goes up and everything, kind of just changes on that front. So it's just like, that's the big unknown for him. And look, the fact is he's not going to be 310. He's not going to be 315. So there is going to be a size element to it, right? Like that's just baked in. But he's got to be able to overcome, that plus the inexperience.
Yeah, and if he's proven to be the better player than Tosh Baker over the summer and then throughout fall camp, it just doesn't make sense for the coaching staff to put out Baker and make him start at right tackle if they don't think he's the better player. Yes, he has more experience, and yes, that's valuable, but you can't willingly put out a player who you don't think is as good as another guy, especially in such an important game, just because he's been out there before. I don't really think that makes sense. And also, you need time to develop that chemistry with the offensive line. The longer those guys are out there together, the faster their progress is going to be. So I understand it. Wagner looks like he could be the starting right tackle. We're going to see how things play out in camp. That's certainly where things are trending right now. We'll be right back with Greg Flammang to hear what his biggest concerns are about this team heading into this season outside of the offensive line. But first, I wanted to tell you about Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Whether you've been planning to go to a game for weeks or if you're feeling spontaneous and want to hit up the nearby ballpark, Gametime is the perfect place for you. I recently used Gametime. I wasn't even planning to go to a Dodgers game that night, but I was like, you know what? I'm down to watching baseball. I looked at the prices on Gametime. I was like, you know what? I need to go. Look at how cheap these prices are. So I had a great time that night, all thanks to Gametime. It is the only ticketing app that gives you the complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. But my favorite thing about Gametime personally is the pricing shows your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you by Factor. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. Fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine What are you waiting for? With over 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. You can crush your wellness goals this July and August with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. And treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Enjoy effortless supply for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well-balanced. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. So there's been a lot of talk about the offensive line throughout the offseason as that being the biggest concern about this team and one potential unit that could prevent Notre Dame from achieving their pretty lofty goals this season. Outside of the offensive line, when you look at the roster, the staff, maybe it's the schedule, what's the biggest concern you have about this team this year?
I would say just Riley Leonard being able to gel with the wide receivers in the passing game. They have a lot of moving. They have a lot of, I'll say moving parts in that you're going to have guys in and out of the lineup. You know, like Jaden Greathouse might be all over the field, right? Jordan Faison might be all over the field. You might have Jaden Thomas all over the field, right? Like you might have guys in different positions and like, you know, he didn't get the spring, right? To work with them and kind of figure out where everyone's going to be and developing a chemistry with them, which isn't to say like he can't develop that, but it is kind of a bigger ask when you don't have receivers in set positions like Notre Dame doesn't, right? I think you'll have Chris Mitchell to the field, right? And I think you'll have, you know, Bo Collins to the boundary. But like, where's Jaden Thomas going to be? Where's Jordan Faison going to be? Where is Jaden Greathouse going to be, right? How are they going to move? How are they going to incorporate the backs? How are they going to incorporate the tight ends? Like he didn't get any of these reps. He didn't get any of that time. So, you know, will it take 6 or 7 games, right, for him to get a full feel of how to utilize the weapons that Notre Dame has within the offense? I don't know how likely it is, but it's definitely possible. I mean, it's definitely on the table. If we saw us, you know, for the first, you know, 3-4 games, you know, going into Louisville and things aren't really clicking in the passing game, would that be a shocking surprise? No, it wouldn't, because of the way that the offseason went. It just is what it is, and there's something they're going to have to work through. But I would say beyond the offensive line, I would think Riley Leonard getting comfortable with all of the different types of weapons and ways that Notre Dame wants to beat teams, I think is probably my biggest concern.
Yeah, on one hand, it's great that you have a bunch of guys in your wide receiver room that can do so many different things for you, but it also does take away reps if you're rotating 7 or 8 guys constantly. It's going to be really interesting to see which wide receivers separate themselves over fall camp, because I think it's going to happen. Like, don't get me wrong, Notre Dame is going to rotate 6, 7 guys no matter what happens, but especially going up against Texas A&M in your season opener, like how deep is that rotation? How are you going to divvy up the snaps among those guys? Or are you just going to say, hey, these are the 3 guys that we feel the most comfortable with being out there? Maybe they get the bulk of them. It's definitely going to be something that is going to be interesting to follow, not just throughout camp, but really throughout like the first couple months of the season. If you had to guess, and I know that this is like a pretty lofty goal, do you see a player on this team who's going to have a Kyren Williams level jump in fall camp? Because if you remember in 2020, nobody was really talking about Kyren Williams going into that camp. Now, granted, it was a very interesting time. We didn't even know if Notre Dame was going to be playing football that year. Then pretty much right away, all the whispers and all the rumors were, hey, this Kyren Williams kid is dominating in camp. And then he ended up having a breakout season. Totally changed the course of Notre Dame football in 2020 and 2021. Do you see a player who could make that kind of a leap starting in camp?
On offense?
Whole team.
You know, the funny thing is, so like Kyren wasn't just the buzz. It was when you saw photos of him.
Yeah.
He just looked like his whole body completely changed. And so he took a huge leap. I don't know that there was someone who was like a redshirt freshman, because like Faison kind of fits, but he kind of broke out already, so he isn't someone. And they didn't really have like a freshman running back who would kind of fit that bill. Like Jabron Payne could have been that person, sort of, just because he didn't have the biggest role. And like if he came out in camp and he was killing it, like that wouldn't shock me. But he's hurt, so it can't be him. I would say if there is anyone who it's like this guy is good and is going to be a factor, oh man, it would have to be like, it would have to be a Don Schuler. I think he would be one where it's like everyone just assumes that Rod Hurd is going to be that second safety. And if a Don Schuler came in and was just like lights out, it's like he's winning this job and he is going to be next to Xavier Watts. Like that wouldn't be like the biggest shock, because we kind of heard things about him last year a little bit. We saw some things from him in the spring that were impressive. Not so much in the spring game, but in terms of like, because remember in 2020 there was no spring because of COVID, right? So we didn't see that spring jump from Kyren Williams. So I think if he came out and was just like lights out and he's winning the job next to Xavier Watts and Rod Hurd's the third safety, right? Like I don't think that's going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me, like he's got the physical makeup too. Like he does. And he was a playmaker in high school. So I think of all, like, especially the fact that he's a freshman, like the redshirt freshman piece of this, I think he's probably the one.
I think Schuler is a really good pick because no one is really looking at safety as like this big question mark.
Yeah.
I think most people just assume that Rod Hurd is going to be the starting safety. He's played a million snaps at Northwestern, even though he's making a position change going from nickel to a true safety. A lot of people are just kind of like, okay, yeah, he'll be there. But if you're right, if Schuler just came out, had this unbelievable camp, and they're like, oh, that's not a question anymore. Like Schuler is going to be the starter. Because you think back to 2020, that running back room, you've got Kyren, who ends up exploding onto the scene. Other than him, you had a freshman, Chris Tyree, and you had Sibo Flemister. So nobody was really talking about that Notre Dame running back room being some big strength that season. And then Kyren Williams breaks out, and now that's one of the best units on the team. So it has to be something like that. I think for me, it wouldn't necessarily be quite like the breakout, but like if Traore just ends up dominating in camp and he's just like, Patel's going to be out there, but he's mostly going to be in there to stop the run when it's a passing situation. Bubakar Traore is going to be out there and he's going to make life hell for the opposing quarterback. That could be an option, but I don't know. On one hand, it's like Kyren Williams don't grow on trees, obviously, but it happened. So
you know what it could be. You know what it could be, honestly, is if someone like Sullivan Absher like just completely took over left guard. It would be something like that, right? Like it's like, what is going on at left guard? Is it going to be Spindler or is it going to be Coogan? And then like Sullivan Absher's like killing it at left guard. He's going to start. Like it would be that is probably more similar to like the Kyren Williams thing. I don't want to say I'm not predicting it at all because I don't know really that much about it in terms of that whole dynamic, right? It's hard to know the dynamic of offensive line, but it would be something like that where it's like he probably fits better than a Don Schuler because I don't think anyone's really expecting anything out of Sullivan Absher this year, like just going into camp. So
real quick, do you think that it's going to be Coogan or Spindler at left guard in the season opener since we're talking about it?
I think it'll be Spindler.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they're going to prioritize being able to move forward. And I think they like Spindler in that role. I think they like him kind of just that straight up, like if he can do anything, he can move people. And I think that's what they want. I think they want the strength. And I've heard some pretty good things about kind of how he's developed his body since he got hurt. And just like the kind of weight that he's put on and the strength that he's put on. So I've kind of heard some things along that line. So I just think he's going to continue that. I think they'll go with him.
The fact that Spindler was even out there in spring practice was impressive.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anyone really expected him to do much or be much of a participant in spring practice because he suffered that knee injury in November against Clemson, right? And then he was out there in spring practice. Now, he wasn't like 100% or anything like that, but I think the fact that he was just out there at all said a lot about him, his recovery, his dedication to getting back out there on the field. So I'm with you. I think it's going to be Spindler this season. Okay. Outside of, left guard, we've talked about the right tackle a little bit. Are there any other position battles that you're really interested in? Because I think, people look at the cornerback position opposite Benjamin Morrison. That's an intriguing battle. I think you could even put backup quarterback in there. Like, which position battle are you going to be following closely over the course of these next few weeks?
I don't know if it's a battle per se, but like linebackers. Like, I think the linebackers are so intriguing because I don't think there's a bad way it goes. Whoever, like, they truly have, I want to say, I guess it's 6 players who, if it becomes like, I think they're going to play 2 regular. I think their base is going to be nickel. They're going to play a Mike and a Will. You can give me any combination, and I would say that's fine because I think they have so many good players at that spot. So I think that'll be interesting. I think kind of a low key, I don't want to say battle, but like something to track is how Botelho was doing in relation to Boubacar Traore. Like, is Traore going to be the guy there, or can Botelho kind of hold him off? And like, where is Josh Burnham fitting in there? Right? Like, how is he doing next to RJ Oben? How's Bryce Young doing? Like, stuff like that is like interesting to me because they're not like quote unquote starting positions necessarily, but like, how much are those guys going to impact the team on a game-to-game basis? Right? How much is KVA going to impact the team on a game-to-game basis? Traore, Bryce Young, Burnham. Like, that's kind of like like I said, it's not that they're battles to start, but it's battles to kind of see how much of an impact they'll have. And that's an interesting thing. And I think it's good to track because there is no wrong answer there. Like, it's only kind of upside. So that'll kind of be fun to track.
Botelho's career arc is so interesting because, he dealt with a lot of trouble at the beginning of it, was sort of this like fiery player who needed to keep his emotions in check, but you always felt like the ability was there. They were trying to figure out where to play him, whether it be linebacker on the defensive line. Finally, they figured out a home for him position-wise. And then last year, he was like everyone's pick to be a breakout player last season. It didn't happen, and now he's almost like forgotten about when you look at Cross, you look at Mills, you look at RJ Oben, you look at Traore, all these other guys. And I think that the fact that Notre Dame wanted Botelho back so much tells you that the coaching staff really believes in him. And I think he could end up having a pretty solid season this year, even though there are young guys behind him that are certainly capable and are going to be pushing him to play like Traore and like Bryce Young too, because you look at pictures of Bryce Young, man, like, I can't believe he's 18 years old. Yeah. And I know that he has grown a lot since he was in high school. He's probably going to continue growing. Obviously, his dad is a Hall of Famer, so it shouldn't be too big of a surprise that his kid is in good football shape, I could say. But I could see a world where Bryce Young is getting like 10 snaps a game pretty early on. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Like, because there's such an obvious, just, it's so easy to plug in a guy. Like, it's third down, throw him in there, And so I don't know about 10 snaps just because I don't know, you would take like.
Yeah, who's not on the field then?
Exactly, right? Like, you still have Josh Burnham there, and you still have RJ Oben there, right? So like you still have those players who, it's like they can get snaps too, but it's just like, will you throw them in? Like, you're up 10-0, you throw them in on a 3rd and 8 or something like that, right? Like being able to get those kind of reps. And is it every game? Like, do they want that out of him every game, or is it just a 4-game thing where you redshirt him, right? Like, that'll be interesting to track there. And like, could he even pass Josh Burnham? And then maybe he will get those 10 snaps a game, right? Like, so that's kind of where it's just, it'll be interesting to follow throughout camp.
Greg and I still have more to get to, including our 5 most important players on the roster heading into camp. But before we get to that, I've got to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. I recently used eBay Motors. I was having some issues with my headlights, and I was like, I'm not really liking the prices I'm seeing at the local mechanic. Let's check out eBay Motors. Boom, there it is. Got it fixed for much cheaper than it would have cost me if I went somewhere else. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep a ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Who do you think are the 5 most important players on this team in order for them to achieve their full potential this year? I think Riley Leonard is an obvious one, but I think you could go in pretty much any direction with the other 4.
Morrison is one.
Agreed.
I mean, huge. He's a huge part of it. So much of what they want to do is because he can lock down a man. He allows that his ability to play man in the way he does allows them to do so much.
Right.
Very important.
Saw that against Ohio State last year. It was so critical.
Yes. Howard Cross is one. Xavier Watts is another one. And then I think Jack Kaiser. I think he's very important. I think he's very important for this team. Having just that anchor in the middle of the defense. It's hard for a defensive lineman who's got their hand on the ground and doesn't see anything basically outside of the tackle box. It's hard for them to be kind of that anchor of the defense. Having someone like that in the middle, Jack Kaiser, especially with Xavier Watts, those two in tandem, I think those are the ones who are, kind of the most important. I would say if I was going off of an offensive player, right, because we only had Riley Leonard there, if I was to throw an offensive player in there who wasn't the quarterback, it would probably be Billy Schrouth.
Interesting. I put Jagasaw. I aligned with 4 out of your 5. The only difference is rather than picking Kaiser, I put Charles Jagasaw.
That's not a bad one. I think they could get, but because of Tosh Baker, I think they could get by there. But you want that. I think because the idea is that Billy Schrouth is going to be their best lineman, in my opinion. I think he's going to be their best lineman, and you don't want to lose that guy. You don't want to lose your best guy, because their best guy this year isn't I don't think he's going to be an All-American or anything. Maybe he will, but I just don't think that. So that's kind of where I'm at. You just don't want to lose your best one.
Do you have any concerns about Jack Kaiser being an every down linebacker? Because statistically, he has literally been the most productive Notre Dame football player per snap over the past 2 seasons. He's not been out there as much as J.D. Bertrand or Maris Leofat, but when he was out there, he made plays. He was second on the team in tackles despite playing significantly less snaps than the rest of the starters. But there is something that, I'm not going to lie, Greg, scares me a little bit. He played 10 snaps in the Ohio State game. I understand they were a nickel a lot during that game, but they really shrunk the rotation. And even though Maris Leofat had a good season last year, the fact that Notre Dame only trusted him to go out there for 10 snaps in the biggest game of the season is a concern. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. It was that game plan specific to one team, but now he's going to be asked to be not only an every down linebacker, the leader of that Notre Dame defense right there in the middle of everything, every single play. So I think he's going to be really good this season. I do think it's going to be a big adjustment for him, though.
I hear you in a vacuum, right? I don't think that I don't think the level of his play is as important as it would have been last year. Because you have those two in front of him. You have those 2 tackles. You have Xavier Watts back there. You have Ben Morrison back there. You have the other linebackers next to him, right? I don't think that he doesn't have to be as good as I think the other linebackers had to be, if that makes sense. Which isn't to say like, I have no concerns, right? Like it is. The fact is, like, he's been productive in short snaps. We said the same thing about Jordan Botelho.
True.
Last year, and that didn't go that great. So, look, I think he'll be fine, right? I don't think he's going to be like a star for Notre Dame. I think he'll be fine. He'll be a fine linebacker for them, and he'll be a good leader in the middle. And I think it helps that while he's important to the defense in terms of getting the operation working smoothly, from a play-to-play, we need you to be a great player in order for the defense to be a great defense. Like, I don't think that's the case. And so that is to his benefit, I think. And I think the fact of the matter is, like, they have a good amount of talent back there. So,
yeah. And they can rotate, too. They have so many other young linebackers. They can afford to take Kaiser off the field and make sure that when he's out there, he's got fresh legs and ready to go. Okay, whenever we do these previews, I like to end with a bold prediction that we can come back and revisit. So give me a bold prediction about Notre Dame training camp.
Bold prediction, Bo Collins. Buzz of camp. I'll stick with it. Yeah, I'll make that. I did great in the spring. Really nailed the Christian Gray. Just knocked that out of the park. So, no, I'll go with it. Bo Collins. He's going to be the buzz of camp.
Okay, mine is going to be Jordan Faison. So we're both talking about a wide receiver. And listen, man, after what we have had to watch at the wide receiver position these past few years, I really hope we're both right. In that there are several Notre Dame wide receivers who really step up, and we come out of training camp going like, you know what? Finally, we're going to see an effective, maybe most importantly, we're going to see a fun passing game from this Notre Dame offense, because it has been a while since we have been able to say that. But Greg, it has been a pleasure as always. Tell the people where they can find you on the way out.
Hit and hustle on YouTube for Irish Sports Daily, at Greg2126 on Twitter. That's where you can find me, man. We're doing good stuff.
All right. Thanks again, man. We'll do this again soon.
All right, boss.
All right, that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back tomorrow morning to react to Marcus Freeman's opening press conference, as well as Notre Dame's first official practice. Then I got some recruiting coverage later in the week and have Brian Smith on the show, Locked On's recruiting insider, to talk about Deuce Knight and everything that's going on with his recruitment. So I promise I'm going to get to it soon. But today and this week, we really got to focus on this team, this season, the start of training camp. For your second listen, I'd encourage you to check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin is the host, and he does a great job talking about the sport from a national perspective. So go check that out. Also, remember to get your mailbag questions in. You can drop them below in the YouTube comments or submit them on Twitter at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Last but not least, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place.